Yes, it is. Oh, just as well. Would you like to be anonymous? So you're happy with your name? Maybe at the end, could we take like a little selfie or something? Because it's nice to have an image. Is that okay?
It's fine, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Right. So, and you prefer Katyjon?
Either. I like the introduction of Katyjon and then the continuation as Katie.
Okay, nice. So
Because that kind of solves the question as to why I have a deep voice.
so it answers the question. Okay, so Katie or Katyjon, you were talking to me just now, and we'll just recap about going swimming.
Yes, going swimming. That's one of the things and one of the biggest reasons to transition fully one way or the other in the end, because if one only partially transitions one's body, then the binary nature of sports facilities, toilets and gyms, it doesn't fit. And I remember once I started taking hormones and gaining and growing breasts, a friend took me swimming, but by then I still had below the waistline genitalia, and that was rather awkward because I could no longer go in the men's because I now had breasts, but I felt really, really awkward being in the women's because I still had some male genitalia. And my friend was the one that made me feel safe and took me in there, and in fact nobody had a problem. In fact, the biggest person with any fear of anything in there was me. I was the one who feared that I was in the wrong place and that it was inappropriate for me to be there. And I was the one who was overtly concerned when actually the people there weren't, and they weren't turning around and thinking, oh my gosh, that's a man trying to invade women's facilities. They were obviously thinking that's a trans person. I'm okay with that. They look very vulnerable, look quite scared to be here. They're not exactly coming in with an aggressive or I own this place kind of attitude. So I think, therefore, that I was the one who felt the most awkward. But I had an op 18 months ago, not exactly a 100% traditional one, but I did have below the waist surgery to a slightly unconventional outcome, but nonetheless there's nothing there now that would disturb anyone in a facility, but there'd be sufficient there to disturb people if I was in the men's still with 30-60 breasts.
Topless.
Yes, exactly. But if I was to be in the women's, there's now nothing that would make them think, oh my gosh, that's a penis in the women's changing rooms. So that side of it is all sorted. Nonetheless, swimming only earlier this month, I went all the way through the facilities, had a very pleasurable swim. Everyone was completely chilled with me being there. And when I came out, someone looked at me, because I was wearing one of those big, fluffy bathrobes that you get in hotels. And apart from long hair, you couldn't even see my breasts, so they just suddenly thought, oh, I must have got a long-haired man coming out of the women's. And they said, do you know where you've just come out of? That's the men's. And I said, yeah, I mean the women's. And I said, see, I get confused still. And I said, no, yes, I know exactly where I've come out of. That's the room I have to use. That's the room that is appropriate for me. And she didn't challenge it after that. She just wanted to be sure that I hadn't made a mistake, that I hadn't got confused. She wasn't really challenging my right to be there, just awareness of whether I knew I was in the right place. And that's the kind of thing I've encountered a lot in daily life. I mean, it's always toilets and gyms and swimming pools. Very, very few other places are binary, to be honest. I remember going into the toilet at Sainsbury's, and I always use the toilet with the shortest queue, or the one that hasn't got a cleaning work in progress sign outside it, which there was outside the ladies. So I went and used the men's in Sainsbury's that time, and went in there, performed the duties that one needs to do to evacuate one's body, not to perv, not to do anything, and then came out, used the sinks, and leaning over the sinks, washing my hands, it obviously became quite obvious that I had breasts. And so a guy comes in to use the toilet, and I don't dress in a feminine sense way at all. I dress very kind of gender down in that sense. Never wear makeup, wear Doc Marten boots and jeans nearly all the time. But yeah, I do wear rings, I do wear bangles, but I probably come across as very gender queer and gender undefined to people. So he can see me leaning over the sink, washing my hands and things, and with a cleavage. And so he comes in, looks at me, and then leaves. Checks the sign on the door, clearly. I couldn't see what he was doing, but I assumed that's what he was doing, because he came back in again. And this time he held the door open rather than coming in all the way, looked at me, and then kept staring back at the door sign, trying to work out, Then he left again. A third time he finally comes in and says, excuse me, I'm confused. Am I in the wrong place? I said, no, mate, you're in the right place. I'm the confused one. At which point he then left and never peed. So again, he was suddenly the one who felt awkward and in the wrong place. And I think having a degree of laid-back confidence, laid-back security about oneself, and knowing one's rights, because there is no such thing as a law against who uses what toilets. Toilets are there for toileting. So if you're at a festival and there's a short queue, use that one. If you're at a club and there's a short queue, or as I say, in a supermarket and one of them's got a cleaning sign out of it, you can use any toilet. And if you're a parent with a young child, you can go into the toilet appropriate to your gender or the toilet appropriate to your child's gender, and no one should give an F. So, you know, so sometimes, if you know though that the law is on your side, that as long as you're going into a toilet to use it for toileting, then anyone can do what you do there in any toilet. If you're going into any toilet to perv, even if it's the same gender as your birth, so you could be, you know, female attracted to female, man attracted to male, or bisexual or anything. If you're going into the toilet to perv, then it doesn't matter what the gender is, it's wrong. So gender really should be shoved out of the way then. They should just call toilets toilets.
Yeah.
And have more of those that are with... you should just have signs on the door saying urinals and the other ones.
Yeah.
Urinals and whatever, bowls. What do they call them, the other ones? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, you know, like, what about the women walking in the toilet with all these urinals and going, oh, my eyes?
Yeah, well, I think
You
the
know.
men think that as well, which is why it's really funny. If there's 20 urinals and two men want to use the urinals, they'll use the two at either end and never next to each other. And if there are spaces, they'll always skip one. So however many urinals you put in, that half of them will remain unused. And if there are spaces, but you'd have to stand between two men, most of them would then go into the cubicle to use the cubicle, or would furtively wait because they don't want other men looking at their... So men are just as worried about seeing another man's penis inside a toilet as would be a woman.
Because I've always thought the urinals sounded hideous.
They are, and they
why
can be, but they're economical.
barriers?
They're economical.
But
They
just a
take
bit
up
of
less
MDF,
space than a toilet.
You know, just like a bit of MDF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the main reason for keeping them is economy. It costs less to put in, you know, you can put in 6 urinals or more for the cost of one cubicle.
Yeah.
So, space and finances. But if that weren't the issue, I think there would be more simply toilets are toilets and gender-neutral facilities. It's been great going around places like Norwich Arts Centre has now got gender-neutral toilets. UEA has got in mild, but they're not removing gendered toilets. Sometimes they're just doubling up and giving one option that's gender-neutral, which is great.
It's funny though, because I went to UEA and I don't want to not have gender-neutral toilets, but I did have this thought was if I fancied a guy and I walked into a gender-neutral toilet and he went into the toilet next to me and I, had to do a poo or something, I'd be like, no, my chances are ruined.
Yeah, but only if you could see your shoes under the toilet door to recognise that it was you and you had very unique shoes.
And, or we walked out at the same time,
Yeah. Then the only thing that's an issue then is whether you washed your hands, and you notice whether or not you washed your hands on the way out.
Oh, that's true, because then you've got all bad hygiene.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's just Britishness. I think we're really messed up around it. In some countries around the world still just have a hole in the floor, and that's pretty gender neutral, or a bush out back. So, I mean, I think we have hang-ups on around toilets, but toilets and gyms and swimming facilities are places of challenge very often for people. And I think sometimes you get challenged more because you go in there sheepishly and nervously thinking you don't belong there, and then people start staring at you. I think that's one of the things I've found in public as well. If I walk around the streets like I have a right to walk around the streets, very few people have issues with me. But if I walk around the streets with my head cowled, looking at my feet, constantly looking over my shoulder to see if anyone's looking at me, then people are going to start staring at me because they're wondering why I'm looking around like that all the time. So,
and you were talking about the double take.
Yeah, I have this kind of rule to myself that if somebody walks past me and then looks back to see what they just saw, who they just saw, etc., I've no problem with that, because if somebody beautiful walked past me, I would definitely double take. And equally, if someone super short, super tall, super different, super goth, you would turn around sometimes just to check what you'd just seen. Not in a negative way, but just to either confirm what you just saw or just to take another look, because people are interesting. But if someone then persistently then keeps staring back and looking back at me a third or fourth time, then I think, now you're staring. Now that's a little bit rude. And so occasionally I stare right back at them, or occasionally I say out loud, yeah, they're breasts. I'm sure you've met some. Yeah. You were birthed on them. But so I try and get people to, get past their hang-ups that way, but I usually encounter it with humour. So I've done stand-up comedy. You get heckling, so you get a little bit used to it in that as well. But I think, I mean, sometimes I've two drunk guys once questioned my gender, and so I sat down and started discussing it with them, and the person I was with said, "What are you doing? That could be dangerous." I was thinking, I don't think they're dangerous. I think they'd fall over if they tried and stood up and attack me, because they looked pissed.
Yeah.
But
and how did they react? Like what?
No, they were really, they sobered up and were really fascinated to be educated. And I was nearly on Come Dine With Me locally, and they rang me up and said that we've chosen the other people for the show. We're looking at putting you in as the extra person, the fourth person, but we think one of the other people is likely to have a problem with your gender presentation. How would you handle it? And I said, probably with education and humour. And they sounded disappointed. Because what they wanted is a bit of drama. And by drama, they mean, you know, a yelling match or fight or offence, something that would make, you know, the kind of TV that is kind of exploitative.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and they were really sweet about it. The next day they rang me up and said, look, you know, you got off lightly, it's fine.
Yeah.
Press pause.
Yeah, that's what I can cut out.
Well, in that case, now we press pause. Bring the dog over here. No, look at that dog.
Oh.
Sorry?
Are you curating at the moment?
No, Sarah's in there. James isn't. So you can go say it to Sarah if you want. You give me the dog. Give me the dog when you go in. Oh, give me the dog.
No
the
dog
dog's
for you.
cute.
No, he's running away. Look
Oh,
at him.
okay.
Look, he's being dragged. Aww. What kind of dog is that? Like,
Cute one. It's a cute breed. I don't know what it is.
It's
No
a
idea
little
what it is.
dog. Little, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, carrying on.
So,
Where was I now? Can't remember.
We were talking about Come
yeah.
Dine With Me, and you were saying that you got
Oh
a
yeah,
slightly-
come dine with me. They in the end they said, look, you know, it's the program, the narrator on the program pretty much does take the piss out of the contestants. That's not exactly the words they used, but they said, you know, your dilemma is you're too nice. As it was. It's the nicest and the nastiest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Yeah, because
You know.
it shouldn't be wrong.
No, but
or, you
being
know,
nice is a problem these days because
Yeah.
it doesn't make good TV. But it does make for good interactions with people in public. Again, if I think it's quite possible to take offence at things, and a lot of things said are offensive. But I've made a kind of a conscious decision to not take offence at 99% of things, and as a result, it has opened up doors to engagement with people, to educate people. Because I mean, I reckon the last 11 years I've had to come out. Well, the thing is, I guess, as trans, perhaps even more so than gay, I don't know, but to an extent, you don't come out once, you come out multiple times. You come out to family, you come out to work colleagues, you come out to partners, you come out to, you know, all these other situations in life. And, you know, and as a trans person particularly, you come out every time you go to the toilet, every time you go to a gendered facility, because people might question your right to use it.
And I mean, because we were sort of starting talking about like negative stories and positive stories, and you were saying that to your face, you can't really think of a negative story.
No, as I say, most of the time to the face, walking around in public, I would say absolutely, people are absolutely fine. And it's, you know, you get looks, but as I say, if you choose not to take offence at someone having just a first or second look, then it's not an issue. And very few ever have that third look, and if they do, you know, I'll knock it off with a quick quip. But no, in public I've not really had any issues. Online, on the other hand, yeah, I've had, you know, harassment, stalkers, death threats, challenges from across the spectrum, even challenges from other trans people.
Really?
But all the way through from a certain group of radical feminists who don't like trans people, or certainly don't like trans people in women's spaces, but for some reason have turned a blind eye to trans men in men's spaces and only don't ever have an issue with that. But so yeah, I've had vehement kind of put downs from them. I've had people, you know, constantly stalking me online, and people, including ex-partners as well, reporting me to the police for things that I didn't do, etc. Just trying to get me into trouble, trying to ruin my life through practical means like that. So the online hate that sometimes you get, though, can affect your real world life. It can affect your real world health. So I've had sleepless nights and, you know, woken up shaking because of what some people have written about me online, and also been interviewed by the police because of some things people have said online, just trying to get me in trouble. And sometimes it's been from the fact that people haven't liked the fact that I'm happy, haven't liked the fact that I am content and getting on with it. And that has come from LGBT people. I've had as much online hate, if not more, from other LGBT people than I have from cisgender people, many of whom don't give a flying monkey what I get up to. They just don't want to know about it because it's mild.
Why do you think that is then? Why do you think there's maybe sometimes more from the LGBT
Sometimes
community?
it's jealousy,
But jealousy of what?
sometimes it's...
That's probably a weird question, but...
Sometimes it's a
Jealousy of your
negativity.
happiness?
Yeah, or the platform I get because I'm willing to put my head above the parapet and talk, be interviewed, educate, etc. You know, they'll turn around and say, it's all about you, that kind of thing. But I suppose I have made it all about me sometimes, but I use that as a platform to gain the opportunity to educate. You know, and I used to be a very insecure person, quite introvert, utterly terrified of living as who I am, utterly terrified of the world around me. And coming out enabled me, or even being outed in the very first instance, enabled me to find a happy version of myself for which, yeah, I am proud and very content with that now. It took a lot of therapy. It took a lot of suicide attempts, a lot of depression to get to the place where I am happy and content with myself. So yes, I am going to celebrate it, and I am going to use it as an opportunity to gain a platform to talk about, you know, LGBT diversity. And I think that's it. Some of the resistance comes from LGBT people who are from an older generation who only believe in, you know, a gender binary and even a sexuality binary. So they only think there's gay, lesbian and straight. Bisexuals aren't to be trusted, and anyone else who's got sexuality outside of that is dissing on the gay and lesbian labelling of the past and all the landmark history and politics that have gone on to win those rights. So they don't like some of the language that young people are coming up with. Equally, they said, you know, that there's only two genders, there's male or female. And I've heard from some people the fact that, oh yeah, we get why some men would cross-dress, but we don't get why some men would change their genitals. We don't understand transsexual, but we do understand transvestite. And then some very big names in the L&G world, lesbian and gay world over the years have said some things that are really quite derogatory towards teenagers and their identity journeys, as you know, as if it's all just kind of nothing to them, as if they can't remember what it was like when they themselves went through the whole process of questioning their identity and finally coming out. I don't find there's a huge amount of respect from an older generation of 30 years older than young people towards the young people and the way they're identifying now, and the fact that they're identifying very often using the language that isn't LGBT but beyond LGBT, in the tail as I call it. There's a whole lot of people packed into the plus sign and or the Q sign, or the fact that young people are reusing the word queer when older people were being queer. So I think there is a difference in the way people are coming out about that. I think it's a lot safer to come out of school than it was 30 years ago. And obviously an older generation have got some very painful memories about that. The fact that young people feel a lot more comfortable to come out, but they're not coming out as lesbian or gay, they're coming out as grey sexual or demi-boy or gender queer or gender fluid. I think they have absolutely every right, because who are previous generations of LGBT to tell the current generation what they should identify as? That's just like straight people saying there's no such thing as gay. Get over it, get a wife, get married, you'll be cured.
I mean, do you think there's some kind of resentment in terms of you're not going through the pain I went through?
Yeah, I mean, I've had that in different circles. I've had that in disability circles, in intersex circles, whereby there's a hierarchy of pain. I think you get the same thing with abuse and outing situations. Basically, I mean, somebody told me that I've had it easy because I didn't have to come out. Somebody outed me, and that made it basically a case of sink or swim. Once I was out, all I had to do was choose to swim, or I would drown. Whereas other people had to deliberate for years to come out, and then face up to the challenge of coming out. As if mine was any easier. I lost 3/4 of my friends. I lost my essentially I lost my marriage, my business and everything over that. I lost my faith, I lost my church, I was thrown out of my church. So over the course of my being outed, it wasn't exactly easy, but yes, I did make the decision that once out, let's see what I can make of this. And actually I'm really appreciative of having been outed after the fact, because I reckon it would have taken me another 5 to 10 years before I came out naturally. So yeah, it was of benefit, but it wasn't easy and it wasn't pain-free.
And so do you think, in terms of, you were talking about 30 years ago, it's a lot harder to come out, like now, because obviously the website is kind of looking at things now where it's not perfect now, but
it's far from perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better. The very fact that you can talk about being gay, LGBT, or even all the letters in the plus tail in school today is because 20 years ago you couldn't, because of Section 28 that basically said you couldn't promote homosexuality in schools, and to talk about it was classed as promotion, or was feared to be promotion. So therefore, to avoid being accused of it, people didn't talk about it at all. And I grew up in an age, yes, where you went to school and you never heard about LGBT. So the language of it wasn't there. But kids have the advantage of the fact that they can talk about it in school. It's not easy, but it's easier, and it's legitimate, and it's allowed, and it's taught. But beyond that, they have the internet, which is, I think, even more useful than the getting rid of Section 28. They can connect with other people through social media and join groups and talk about things online.
Yeah.
Again, when I was at school, even all the way through university, there was no internet. There was where to Google how you felt, to connect with others through social networks, to find people of like mind who you could compare your experience with and realize, oh my God, that's just like me. So I think laws, education systems, the way discrimination and protected characteristics have gone, particularly in the UK, has all been positive. But the internet and even, Web 2.0, the social media side of it, have been as equal, if not more, of a boon to connecting people and enable people to discover themselves and gain a vocabulary for coming out, and a way to not just come out as one person in 10,000, but to come out as one person and then realise you're actually one person in 100 or one person in 50, because there are more like you. And I think that is a great social healing, to realise you're part of a tribe, part of a group, and yet at the same time you're still uniquely yourself. And I think there's greater diversity within LGBT now, as I say. Was it 50% of Generation Zers identify as neither gay nor straight, somewhere between the two on a spectrum, and also 50% feel that they're not 100% male or 100% female. That's not saying they're suddenly trans or even non-binary. It's just recognising that most people, if you sit them down and talk to them, most guys even, if you say to them, do you feel 100% male, or do you feel as though you've got 10% feminine? And you say, no, I'm in touch with my feminine side, I'm 10, 20% feminine. They would, I think more and more people are cool with talking about that, without it being a thing.
Yeah, I was talking to someone recently, we were just talking about the younger generation, because obviously I'm so old, and we were sort of saying, we felt like they were a very accepting, the most accepting generation almost. I mean, would you agree with that? Or
I think they are in many respects. The number of teenagers I've spoken to who talk about who they fancy, there's no words for it, because they say, I just fancy human beings with great humour, great nature, kindness and understanding, and who listen, that kind of thing. And yeah, good looking is a bonus. But ultimately, I said, but what about their gender? I said, no, that's not that important. And it's like gender is way down the list in terms of sexuality. And I can see that for some people who are very binarily straight or gay, that comes as a challenge when you've got a group of people out there now who are saying, gender's not that important to my relationships. And if gender isn't that important, that means the label gay or straight or lesbian doesn't really matter much either, because what they're basically saying is I'm human sexual.
It's the person,
I fancy other human beings, irrespective of how they identify their gender with it, or whether, even if they're cis and very happy with their gender, but the nature of their gender is not in the top 3 priorities in their relationships, which I think is radical. And I think, therefore, young people are teaching adults, cis and cis, straight and LGBT, are teaching them, how to respect other human beings, and young people are leading the way on that. But it's a challenge, yes.
It's like I was talking to someone recently, and she was basically saying that she came out as lesbian because she fancied a woman, but then she said now she's like, well, I fancy men now, and so it's sort of almost like she felt she had to come out as a lesbian because she fancied this woman, but she said she's realised now it was the person, or who knows.
Yeah.
But
I mean, they did do a physiological experiment, wired up a bunch of women, got them to watch some women-on-women action on a screen, and measured their responses, every woman responded, and they basically came out with that as a newspaper headline: "There's no such thing as a straight woman." People have argued there's no such thing as a straight guy either. It's just the guys who got even more hang-ups about admitting to the fact that they might find other men handsome, etc. But yeah, I think somebody said it years ago. In fact, I can't remember the name of the person, but she wrote a book about it, basically arguing that the majority of people are bisexual, but society, culture, religion, upbringing, prejudice stops most people from acting on it. And also stops, I think there's also, you don't always have the opportunity. You have a default setting, which is default is straight, and the next best thing is gay, and this bi seems to be the third option, whereas actually bi is almost could and should be the default option, and gay and straight should be the choices one makes after one has already accepted that one could love or go out with anyone. And to me, that would be, I would love to see people raised with the idea that, and perhaps we are now entering that generation, now that we have, same-sex marriage and everything else, that if that gets taught not just in schools but also in churches and everywhere else, and in religious environments, that culturally, from the time you go to primary school and people start going to each other's birthday parties and joking about who they like, the default is that you could like anyone of any gender, and if it's the same, it's not a problem. If that were the default, then people would have to come out as straight, which would be radical. So that, almost like gay, lesbian and straight would be what you had to come out as, but bi, pan, whatever you want to call it, human sexual, if that was the default, that would completely change things around, and people would have to say, actually, I don't like everyone or anyone, I only like people who are opposite gender to me. And you'd have to come out straight, and I think that would be a radical new experience for straight people if they were the ones who had to come out.
Yeah, and they'd be like, "Oh, really? You're so narrow-minded."
You'd have straight coming out stories. People said, "It's I'm ashamed to admit it, but I actually only fancy half of the planet and not 100% of the planet."
Yes, it's like, I'm sorry, I just I'm fussy in that way or something, like not eating your vegetables.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't like sweet corn.
But okay, so we should probably wrap it up soon. So we were talking about good stories, and you said you had thought of one.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the ones I think of is it's not about. I mean, most of the times I come out as someone who, actually I identify as asexual now, but I've been with guys and girls, mostly girls. I still appreciate the beauty of both internally and externally. Their hearts and minds, not their body bits. But I remember I did a lot of therapy, a lot of workshops and things to try and get to a place of, yeah, that's fine. Just to, should we just go stand inside?
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
Sure. No, I'm up front anyway. I'm up front for Paint-Out's desk in a minute anyway.
Yeah, so how you let yourself out from the front door?
Yeah, that's what we've got onto one way.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm here all the way through the night till 10 anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because I'm here for the play tonight and I'm sitting at the desk. That's fine. So I did lots of workshops and therapy and work, and I kind of made a decision that I wasn't willing to change my body until I got to a place of accepting it fully as it was before I changed it to what I wanted. So I went to America and did some sex, body and relationship workshops out there as well. And what amazed me out there was the acceptance I encountered in California on these workshops, which would have 80 participants and 10, 15 people running the workshop and assisting on a workshop. And I went on these workshops and said, I identify as female, my name is Katie, and I had an entirely male body still at the time. It was pre-hormones, pre-transition, pre-everything. And they didn't blink. They totally accepted me as Katie, as female. They didn't even ask to see whether my body matched or anything else like that. So they wouldn't, there was no kind of having to prove anything. And I got to complete and do these workshops as female and with entirely a male body. And because these workshops included, they were clothing optional, so you could do them naked, semi-clothed or clothed. Even when I took my clothes off, they still treated me as female. And if that created issues with a particular exercise on a workshop, they would come up and talk to me in advance and say, this one might throw you a little bit. How do you want to handle it? And they would discuss it with me. So that was one of the nicest, most positive experiences I encountered, to be in a room with 80 people who, before I even transitioned my body, totally treated me as female. And and because I was doing most of these as naked, I didn't even have the clothes in a stereotypical world might signify a gender. So like standing there in a skirt, most people will think you're female. Not that all women wear skirts, and some still do too. But the point was, though, even standing there completely naked with a male body, they treated me as female.
Yeah.
If that's even a thing. But the point is that I felt respected.
Yeah.
And that was the most positive experience. And that group of people was not an LGBT community. It was just a community of people that were on a workshop that paid to be there, but who were exploring being more aware of human beings. It was called the Human Awareness Institute, and it was about accepting your body, accepting the bodies of others, being able to be considerate towards, affectionate towards, and respectful towards people of all genders. Being able to step outside your heterosexual box without being gay. In other words, if you chose to hug a man, stroke a man's cheek, and you were a man, it didn't make you gay. It just made you a human being showing care, respect and affection to another human being. So I found that was probably the most positive experience I've ever encountered. But as I say, most of the time now, everything is positive, really.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I will stop recording this. Hang on. Stop.